And so yeah, I'm going to speak about geometry. So I'm not going to speak about graph theory, but it will be very basic, elementary, I would say, math. And yeah, I will so generalize the De Bruyn-Agius theorem and revisit some kind of notion of line. So first, we'll start in the Euclidean plane, and I will tell you what is the De Bruyn-Agius theorem. And so the first theorem I want to show is the Sylvester-Gallai theorem. So Sylvester-Gallai and De Bruyn-Agius are very like a fundamental theorem of geometry. Actually, De Bruyn-Agius, we are going to see it's not really geometric, it's maybe more finite combinatorial set, like a combinatorics and finite set. But so first, the Sylvester-Gallai. So what does it say, the Sylvester-Gallai? It says that if you take n points in R square, in the Euclidean plane, for example, here I have 6 points, every pair of points define a unique line. So if I have some points, they define a set of lines. So for example, in here, it defines those lines. So if I have n points, it defines a certain number of lines, say m lines. And Sylvester-Gallai theorem says, so it was first asked, the question was first asked by Sylvester in 1893, so a long time ago. And he was asking, okay, for every point configuration like this, either all the points are in the same line, like this. In this case, they define a unique line. It's very interesting. Or they will define what is called an ordinary line, so a line with exactly 2 points. And then this question was kind of forgot until Erdős raised it again in 1944. He couldn't prove it, and Gallai gave the first proof. And the proof, I'm going to show you a proof here that is due to Kelly. It is a really, really, really beautiful proof. So here is how it goes. So we are in the R square, so we have a notion of measurement, of distance. And for every line, for every pair of points lines, so that the point is not in the line, there is a distance between the point and the line. So now just choose the pair point line so that the distance is minimized. Okay? Assume it is this one. Then I claim that this line has exactly 2 points. So let's check. So it has at least 2 points. And assume for contradiction that it has 3. If it has 3, there is at least one side of this projection that has 2 points, say this one. Okay? But then this line exists, and together with this point, it contradicts the minimality. Boom. So this is a really, really simple proof. And this was proved in the 60s, so even maybe the 70s. So it needs 20, 30 years to find it. And so it's a very beautiful proof, and those ordinary line is a low line of research, because actually here we prove that there is at least one line with exactly 2 points, but the tight result is that there is at least 3. And actually the number of ordinary lines grows with the number of points, and recently it was proved by Green and Tao that the number of ordinary lines is at least n over 2, where n is the number of points, and even 3n over 4 when n is odd. This was not under Dirac-Motzkin conjecture, and yeah, this was proved a few years ago. But I won't speak too much about Sylvester-Gallai, but I wanted still to mention it because the proof is really beautiful, and it is also De Bruyn-Agius. This version of De Bruyn-Agius theorem is okay. Actually, this would not really deserve the title of De Bruyn-Agius theorem. This is more a corollary of Sylvester-Gallai. And this says that if you take n non-collinear points in the plane, then they will define at least n lines. So here, if I'm back, n points define a certain number of line m, and De Bruyn-Agius theorem say that m is at least n. Of course, assuming that they are not all in a line. So this is a very beautiful result. And so why is it a corollary? It's an easy consequence of Sylvester-Gallai, because we can do it by induction knowing Sylvester-Gallai. So take n points in the plane, and we know there is a line with exactly 2 points, like this. Now, this is say point x, delete x. Okay? So the rest, I have n minus 1 point here, Then there is two cases. Either they are all in a line. Okay, first case is they are not all in a line. Then by induction, they define at least n-1 distinct lines. And when I add this guy here, I add also this line. Because when I delete this line, I lose this point, I lose this line, because there was no more 2 points to define it. So when I add it back, I win a line, so I have my n lines. And in the case where the n-1 points are all in a line like this, then I find what is called, so I know exactly what my configuration looks like, and I find what is called the near pencil, like this. And this is easy to see that here I have m equal n. The number of lines is equal to the number of points, and it is the unique tight configuration. And this is the result that I want to generalize, this one. So as I told you, it's not the real de Bruner's theorem, this is the true real de Bruner's theorem. So if you have a finite geometry, what I call finite geometry, you can see it as a hypergraph. It's a set of vertices and hyperedges, so that every pair of vertices belong to exactly one hyperedge. So this is really like lines. Okay? So hyperedges can be seen as lines. And de Bruner and Adorsch proved in 1948 that if H is a finite geometry, then the number of lines is at least the number of points, and equality occurs if and only if H is the near pencil, so this one, but here you add the finite projective plane. So, for example, the Fano-Plane. So you don't really need to know what is a finite projective plane, but maybe you all know the Fano-Plane. It has 7 lines and 7 points. One observation is that it does not have ordinary lines. Every line has at least 3 lines, exactly 3 lines here. So in finite geometry, it does not have Sylvester-Gallai property. And there is a lot of proof of this result. And okay, this is not really that this has a strong geometric favor, but the proof are purely combinatorial, most of them. Okay. So what do I want to say next? Okay. So the goal of the talk is to generalize this theorem. And okay, the generalization, I want to generalize first the notion of line. Because the goal of the generalization is to actually generalize this theorem. This is true in Euclidean plane, and we would like to see if it is true in any metric space. But first we need to define what is a line in a metric space. So what is a line in a metric space? So first, what is a line in a Euclidean plane? So here we need the notion of 2 points that induce define a line. And what is, so if I look at 2 points A and B, like this. So yeah, 2 points A and B, I have this. What points they will contain? They will contain all points y, so that distance between ya plus distance between ab equal distance between y and b. This we will write it yab. This means a is between y and b. Then it will also contain every point x that is between a and b, and every point z, so that b is between a and z. Okay? So using this definition of lines, I only need distance to define them. So I can define my line in any metric space. And actually, we can see that so we don't even need distance, because there is this notion of betweenness. So this will be a very important notion in the talk. So it's a ternary relation, and we say that ABC, we write it like this, means, so this you need to understand that B is between A and C. So if you give me a set of points and you tell me only what point is between two others, I know the lines. It defines the lines. Okay, so if you give me a metric space, actually I don't need the distance. The metric space induces a betweenness relation, and that's enough for me. And actually I can even, there is even too much information to define line in the betweenness. I just need to know what are the collinear triple. And like the line defined by AB will be the point AB, and every point X so that ABX is a collinear triple. So this is three notions to define lines, and I will go back to them later in the talk. But first, let's see more what happened in a metric space. So now we know how to define lines in a metric space. But those lines are really strange. I'm not even 100% sure they would deserve the name of line. And so let's take so the weirdness is that there is several weirdness that I put here. So two lines may intersect on more than 2 points, which is very strange for lines. We will see an example. A line might actually even be the proper subset of another one. And also, Sierra-Stogalite does not hold in metric spaces. So we lose this kind of fundamental property of stuff. So let's do an example with the C5. So this is a graph. Every graph induces a metric space. Two adjacent vertices are distance 1, and then the distance is the shortest path. So let's see what happened with the C5. Okay, there is the draw. Okay, if I ask you what is the line BC. So I write BC with a bar is the line defined by the point B and C. So what are the points that are in the line BC? So first there is B and C. Okay, does it contain D? Yes. Yes. So this is because there is a shortest path from D to B going through C, like C is between B and D. And similarly, it contains A. But that's it. Okay, maybe I can do the thing. I have slides, so I can use them. So here's it. It's the line AB. So the line AB contains C and E. And then, so it's a 4 points line. We can, and like this is, so we can deduce that every line that will be induced by two adjacent vertices, there will be 4 points line. And if I take two vertices that are distance 2, for I say A and C, for example, what does it contain? It contains B, but that's it. So a way to see that it does not contain D is just to look, for example, at the distance. I have A, B, and D, and what are the distances? No, A, D, and C. So distance between A and C is 2. Distance between A and D is 2. And distance between D and C is 1. This is not a good triangle. It does not satisfy the triangle inequality. So they are not collinear. There is not one that is between the other. So the line AC is equal to ABC and is a proper subset of the line AB. So they intersect on 3 vertices, and actually one is the proper subset of the other. And you can see that there is no line with exactly 2 points. Okay? So is there a question on the notion? It's clear? Maybe something else that I can point out? Okay, if you look, for example, at this metric space, again it's a graph, so the tree, this tree. If you look at the line BC, what will it contain? All the points, exactly. A, B, C, D, E. And what is very strange is that if you look at the point A, C, and E, A, C, and E, they are in the line, but they are not collinear. Okay, so this is a very strong difference with the Euclidean plane. When if you have a line, every triple in the line is collinear. Here it's not the case anymore. This is the reason why the intersection might be large. Okay, so this is a strange object, but we're going to study it. And maybe I can again say something. When you think about line defined by 2 points in metric space, it's nice to have this candid draw. The line between defined by A and B contains every guy on the left of A, every guy in the between, and every guy in B. But no, it's not a thin line. It can be, there can be many things here. So it more looks like a candy than as a line. Okay. Okay, if you have questions along the talk on this definition, and you can stop me whenever you want. Okay, so now we have a good definition for line in metric space, and so all this work was started by Rajesh Fatal in early 2000. At the beginning, he wanted more to generalize Sylvester Gallai, and then he got interested in de Bruijn-Adesh and proposed this conjecture together with Xiaomin Chen, that any finite metric space on n points either induce at least n distinct lines or induce a universal line that is a line containing everyone. So this is the generalization of de Bruijn-Adesh, because the de Bruijn-Adesh say either at least n distinct lines or they are all in a line, so it's exactly the same. So I will speak about this conjecture and around the conjecture. So the best, I will give you this proof in particular. We proved a few years ago that every metric space has either a universal line or at least square root n distinct lines. And this is the best lower bound so far. And okay, but before I speak about the conjecture, I want to go back to the definition of line. So we saw that there was three concepts that were useful to define line. We have choice. Either we use the distances, but we can always also use the betweenness. It is more general. So we lose some information, but we still have enough information to define lines. So we can count lines in set of vertices together with the ternary relation of betweenness. And even more general, we can just get interested to collinearity. So I give you a set of points, and I tell you which triple are collinear, and okay, count what the line looks like. So this is the more general to the less general. So I will speak about the three notions, and starting with collinearity, the most general one. So this will we will have to count lines in what we call a tree uniform hypergraph, tree graph. So what is happening here? So tree graph. So tree graph is a hypergraph with hyper edges of size 3, three uniform hypergraph. And interpret the fact that ABC is a hyperedge if ABC is collinear. Doing this, you can define lines in any tree graph. Like the line AB will be the points A and B plus every point C, so that ABC is a hyperedge, is an edge. Right? And then we can ask our favorite question. Does it have the de Bruijn-Adesh property? So when I said de Bruijn-Adesh property, it means give me a tree graph. Either there is a universal line, so a line containing every point, or there is at least n distinct lines. So the first observation is that you cannot give me a tree graph. The number of lines grows with the number of points, which was maybe not completely obvious at first glance, but this is an easy proof. So give me a tree graph, and let's look at the incidence. So I have n points, and they define a certain number of lines. Say m lines that I call L1, L2, until Lm. And I want to prove that m is at least log n. And I have one information, is that there is no universal line. Okay? So now assume that there is here two columns that are exactly the same. Okay? So it means that if Vi is in a line, then Vj is 2. And if Vi is not in a line, then Vj is not neither. And we're going to see that this cannot happen because this would imply that Vi Vj is a universal line. And indeed, so I want to prove that if this happens, then Vi Vj is universal. So indeed, take any point x. Okay. What I know is that if I look at the line x defined by x and Vi, Vi is in this line. So by my hypothesis, I know that Vj is also in this line. That means exactly that the triple Vi Vjx is collinear. Okay? But that implies then x is in the line Vi Vj. This is true for every point. So Vi Vj is a universal contradiction. Okay? That's really a strange look. So this means that no column is the same. So all those define a distinct subset of lines. So the maximum number of we have that m is at least 2 to the n. No, log n. Okay, just because there is not enough space Okay, so that was a simple observation. This is the more general thing you can look with tree graph. There is no structure. Is there any question on the? So back on the question, do tree graph have the De Bruijn-Hurst property? So the answer, we know it, is no, they don't have. And this is a result of Chen and Schwatal that found a construction that has at most C to the square root log n lines. And this is it is smaller than any polynomial in n. So we saw that metric spaces they have at least square root n distinct lines. This is polynomial, and this is less than polynomial. So we can really see that metric space gives us a structure. The construction is fairly easy, but maybe I will skip it. It's very elegant, the construction. So also we had, this was a trivial proof for log n, and we have a hard proof with Bondy, Chen, Snifo-San, Schwatal, and Yao for 2 minus little o of 1 log n. But the proof was nice. So this is the best lower bound on the minimum number of lines that a tree graph must define. And so the question is, what is this the good order of magnitude? What is the minimum number of lines induced by an endpoint tree graph with no universal line? So I have no idea about what the answer should look like. It's a nice question. Okay, now I want to speak to you about still about tree graph, but I will put structure on the tree graph. Because when there is no structure at all, it does not have the Bruijn-Hurst theorem. And so, okay, so this is, we are back in the original De Bruijn-Hurst theorem. So finite geometry, again, it's a hypergraph with a set of points and a set of hyperedges L, so that every pair of vertices belong to exactly one line. And De Bruijn-Hurst say that the number of lines is at least the number of points, and the equality holds only in the near-pencil and finite projective plane. And there is a way to state this theorem in terms of tree graph. A very elegant way. It was observed by Schwatal, I think, first. So if I take a tree uniform hypergraph VE, and I look like the set of lines it defined, V L of H will be a finite geometry. It means that two lines, two pairs of points are in a unique line, if and only if. So at first glance, this is a bit strange property. If and only if every time I have 4 points can be either 0, 1, or 4 hyperedges. So it's a tree uniform hypergraph, so hyperedges are of size 3. And this is an if and only if. It is a simple observation. I can just give you maybe the really quick intuition. Assume that 4 points carry 3 hyperedges. Okay, exactly 3. So this is say A, B, C, D. Then the line BC will contain A, B, C, D, and the line AC will contain A, B, C, but it will not contain D. Because AC, because ACD is not a triple. So it means that the points A and B, they are in 2 distinct lines. So it's not going to be a finite geometry. So this is an if and only if. So we can restate the De Bruijn-Hurst theorem like this. If H is a tree graph so that only 4 points belong to 0, 1, or 4 hyperedges, then the number of lines is at least the number of points, and equality holds if and only if the line system is a near-pencil or finite geometric plan. And Baudou, Bondy, Chen, Snifo-San, Chernovsky, Schwatal, Freimal, and Zwolz, they prove this very, really it's a beautiful theorem. They give a strong generalization of the De Bruijn-Hurst theorem. So here, instead of saying that in the tree uniform hypergraph, each 4 points carry 0, 1, or 4 hyperedges, they add 3 here. So it's more general. And not only they prove that the number of lines that is the number of points, but there is a new tight example, which is the standard complement of standard triple system. So I won't go in detail. It's pretty simple. If you take the complement of standard triple system, the set of lines will be every set of n-1 points. So they will strongly intersect. And this is a very nice.
Just a definition question.
Yep.
So when you say that the 4 points belong to 3 hyperedges, you mean the set ABCD contains 3 hyperedges?
Yeah, it's not very well. Yeah, you're right. So ABC carry 0, 1, or 4 hyperedges. Maybe it's a better way.
Also not well.
No? So every time you look at 4 points, you look the hypergraph induced by those 4 points.
Yeah.
How many hyperedges it has? 0, 1, or 4. Induced. Yes, induced. Right. Okay, so this is a very nice result, and in this line of research you can do you can continue in this line of research. So the example, we know that, for example, if every 4, okay, so now when I write H014, it means that it's a true uniform hypergraph, so that every 4 points can be 0, 1, or 4 hyperedges, and so then you can play with this number. So for 0, 1, 2, 4, it fails. It is the same example as I told you for tree graph. They proved it for those. All those proofs are pretty easy compared to the other one, and it is open for those classes of tree graph. And also you can ask for more strange property, like 5 points carry at most this kind of hypergraph. You can continue in this. Yeah, here I put this. I think Metuku and Tomskin will be a postdoc here this next year. So there. Okay, so let's skip to another. Sorry, you wanted to?
What is coming?
Casey Tompkins? Oh, when is coming this week? Abhishek?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. Okay, so this was for tree graphs. So when we define line with only collinearity, and now we're going to go in metric spaces and betweenness relation. Okay, so we saw that if you look at the metric space, it induces a betweenness relation. Okay, and what is the properties of this betweenness relation? Not every betweenness relation comes from a metric space. They have strong properties. So I put here 3 postulates, 3 axioms. If ABC, so when I say ABC, it means B is between A and C. If ABC, then CBA. So if B is between A and C, then B is between C and A. This is okay, symmetry. If B is between A and C, it is B2. If B is between A and C, then C is not between A and B. This is also kind of normal. And the third one is interesting, it's the inner transitivity. So I claim that in every metric space, if I have A, B, C, so when B is between A, C, it means that there is a geodesic from A to C that goes through B, where a geodesic is a shortest path. Fancy way to say shortest path. So if I have A, B, C and B, X, C, so I have a shortest path from B to C going through X, then I have, okay, I will write it here maybe, A, B, C and B, X, C imply A, B, X, C. So this notation means that there is a geodesic from A to C that goes through B and X. So it means that B is between A and X, X is between A and C, etc. Okay? And okay, it's easy to see that in the metric space this always holds, just because of the triangle inequality. So so this is inner transitivity. And okay, definition: if a betweenness relation, we say it is pseudometric if it satisfies those 3 axioms. So those 2 are not really necessary for defining line because they only imply 3 points. But this is very important. So we say betweenness is pseudometric if it satisfies B1, B2, and inner transitivity, T1. So this is a kind of wild generalization of metric space, because metric space, there is a pseudometric betweenness on 7 points that are not metric, even maybe 6 points, I don't remember. And so we venture to conjecture that maybe even pseudometric betweenness have the Debrunner-Deutsch property. So they define a lot of lines. So when I say again Debrunner-Deutsch property, it means that if you give me a betweenness relation on endpoints that satisfy those 3 axioms, they define a universal line It defines a universal line, a line containing everyone, or at least n distinct lines. Okay, a nice question would be, what are the other axioms that are satisfied by metric betweenness? So Schwatal, it would be Menger was the first to speak about that, inner transitivity that was satisfied by metric space, but in the 30s. And Schwatal tried to continue this line of research. He found 3 or 4 more axioms that involved 6 or 7 points, and then he stopped because it seems that there is no good answer to the question. So we can, if you give me a betweenness, I can decide in polynomial time if it is metric or not. But I don't remember the proof, but the proof suggests that there will not be a simple set of axioms that will give you. Okay. Okay, so I claimed before that metric space has at least square root n distinct lines. But actually, I will more prove you this theorem that say that pseudo-metric betweenness with no universal line has n to the 2/5. And the idea are almost the same as for the metric spaces. So here, the only tool, the only structure I have, the only tool I have is the inner transitivity, this thing. And it is enough, it is interesting using tree graph. This is a polynomial lower bound. In tree graph, it's a sub-polynomial. So this means that really inner transitivity gives us some structure that we can work with. So the proof is fairly easy. So first is a definition. So recall the definition of a line. AB is AB plus all x, such that xab, axb, or abx, x. And I will use a lot this notation. x1, x2, xk. This means that if I take 3 vertex here, xi, xj, xk, and xj is between xi and xk. So this is some kind, this behave a bit like lines in Euclidean plane. Because we saw that in a line, in metric space, there might be 3 points that are non-collinear. This is very bad. In here, every 3 points, every triple is collinear. So I will use this. So then first I need a lemma, a very important lemma, this one. If B is a pseudo-metric betweenness with no universal line, and it contains, so let's call that a geodesic of length k. If it contains a geodesic of length k, then I can find at least k distinct lines. So in the Euclidean plane, it is very easy to see. If you have x1, x2, xk, and you know there is no universal line, there is a point that is outside the line. And then this point plus each of those k points will define a new line. Actually, I have even k plus 1 distinct lines. Okay? So the proof here is slightly more complicated, but it works more or less the same idea. So I will skip the proof. There is some small study of cases where you use inner transitivity. Okay, so we need to remember that. If I have a geodesic of length k, then I have k distinct lines. And then the magic of inner transitivity arrives, because I can define a very nice poset using only inner transitivity. It says the following: so fix a point x in my betweenness relation, and for every other 2 points a and b, I say that a is smaller than b if xab holds. So there is a geodesic from x to b going through a, and I claim that this is a poset. So I need to prove transitivity. So if A is smaller than B and B is smaller than C, that implies that X, B, C. And here you see it, I have XAB and XBC, so I have XAB and XBC. So by inner transitivity, I have XABC. So in particular, I have, what did I want? A smaller than C, because I have X, A, C that holds. So it is a poset. So I'm happy. I have a structure poset. I'm going to use it. And actually, this proof gives even more. It says that if I have X1 smaller than X2 smaller than Xk, then I have a long geodesic. Okay, So now you see it coming with the previous lemma. If I have a long chain, I have a lot of lines. This is what is written here. If there is a chain of size n to the 2 over 5, then I have a geodesic of length n to the 2 over 5, and I have my n to the 2 over 5 lines. So I can assume there is no chain of length n 2 over 5, and thus there is an empty chain of size n to the 3 over 5. This is there's a name to this theorem, but this is easy. Dilworth theorem, exactly. So what does it mean to be, let's draw this long anti-chain. This is A. So what, if A and B are not comparable, so say A and B is in my anti-chain, what does it mean? It means that, okay, and it means that I don't have XAB nor XBA, right? By definition. So this implies that if XAB are collinear, then what? Then AXB. Then X must be between A and B. This is the only remaining case. So I will use this. So okay, I have my big empty chain. It is of length n to the 3 over 5. And I'm going to put equivalent classes, partition the vertices into set A1, A2, AT. And 2 points are in the same set, UV, if and only if XU equal XV. Okay? Okay, so I can do this. And now, so X plus a point here will define a line that is distinct for X plus a point here, etc. So if T is larger than n to the 2 over 5, I'm happy. So I can assume that T is smaller than n to the 2 over 5, and by pigeonhole principle, since I have n to the 3 over 5, I have a set AI here, which is of length n to the 1 over 5, large set here. Okay? And now I claim that any 2 points here will define distinct lines. Actually, I claim that if I take 2 points here, A, B, the line AB will contain A and B, but no other point from this set. They will all be distinct. So this is easy to prove. Take 3 points A, B, C, I claim that they cannot be collinear. If they cannot be collinear, it means that the line AB indeed intersect this set only on A and B. So let's prove that A, B, and C cannot be collinear. So I know that I have XA equal XB equal XC, because they are in the same AI. So in particular, I have B that is in the line XA, which implies that ABX is a collinear triple. But I know that if they are collinear, it means that X is between A and B. So I have AXB, and similarly I have ABC, I have AXB, AXC, and BXC. Okay? And now assume ABC is collinear, say like this. B is between A and C. Then, together with this, and inner transitivity, it implies that I have AXBC, but then B is smaller than C, contradiction. Okay, so that ends the proof, n to the 2 over 5. Alright, so if we look closely at the proof, we really see that I think all the lines we find, they are kind of local. Either we find line of form X plus a vertex, and that's enough. So I really use one vertex plus the other one. Or in the chain, it's almost the same. And yeah, so it really means that this is not this is not the truth. Truth should be n, I would say. And it looks like there is place in the proof to do something better, but for the moment we couldn't. Okay, I have not much more time. Okay, I want to speak about this anyway. So this is a line of research to look for lines in betweenness relation. So we saw the inner transitivity, it's a natural axiom, because it comes from metric space, but let's see what are the natural, a way to define naturally axiom for betweenness. So let's take a betweenness relation, and AB define a line like this. Okay? So what is the inner transitivity say? Is that if I have a point X here and a point Y here. So what does it mean? It means that I have XAB. So this is by definition of this draw. And AYB. And then inner transitivity tell me that actually there is a shortest path from X to B that goes through Y and A. So this implies X, A, Y, B. I should have taken the same, okay, too bad. And there is other way to do this. For example, if there is a point X here and a point Y here, it means that I have XAB and ABY. And then what I can say is that maybe I can force this to be a shortest path, a geodesic. So this to imply XABY. This means that when I have a geodesic like this and a geodesic like this that intersect at least two vertices, then the union is a geodesic. This is of course true in Euclidean plane, for example. This is not true at all in metric space, even in graph metric. Assume that you have this AB, X, Y, and this edge. Then I have XAB, ABY, but I don't have XABY. This is a mean cycle. Okay, then there is two more. AB. If they are both here, I can force them. So I have XAB and YAB. I can force this part to be like a line, to be thin. So this I can say, okay, it is XYAB or YXAB. This I force this is true in Euclidean plane. This is why I say it forces. So if betweenness satisfy this axiom, it means that the lines will look like this. Okay, and the last case will be when they are here. And this say that in the between, so if I have AXB and AYB, then I have AXYB or AYXB. So if a betweenness relation satisfies this axiom, the line will look like this. Okay? So it's fairly easy to see that if you satisfy the four axioms, the set of lines you define is a finite geometry. It's exactly the same. And so the question is, can you drop some of the axioms? Oh, this is not the good slide. Okay. Okay. So the question is, can we drop some of the axioms? And I could prove that if you drop this axiom, it is still true. It has the De Bruijn-Husch property, and it's a fairly easy proof. I have no time to say it. And okay, the question I'm more interested in is if I have only T1 and T2, this is called transitive betweenness. I have the two kinds of transitivity. Can I prove De Bruijn-Husch? So I could prove square root n, but I couldn't do better. But there is fairly enough structure to imagine that it's really true. Okay, so this was for bit-tweeness relation. Okay, this was the proof for metric spaces and the lower bound of square root n. And the proof is very similar with the one on pseudometric betweenness. So I will skip it. And now I want just to survey a little bit all the results that are not known along the Chern-Fattal conjecture, so in metric spaces. So an observation is that so the conjecture, when I said the conjecture, is the Chern-Fattal conjecture. So metric space have the De Bruijn-Dutch property. So it is enough to look at metric space with integral distances. So this is some linear programming. Like if you okay, it's an observation because the metric space is defined by a lot of inequations. For every triple, you look at the triangle inequality. So you have a set of choose 3 inequation. And then you want to solve this with an integral, and this is always possible. So yeah, you can look only at integral distances, and this is an excuse to look at metric space. Oh, I thought I was going to say graph, but this is not. So this is, yeah, at metric space with integral distances, but this is not for this theorem. So this is a theorem that says that if you have d distinct distances, then the number of lines is linear, n over 5d. So okay, I will skip also the proof, it's too long. But this is nice. Okay, so yeah, when the number of distances is bounded, we can say more. So we still don't have n, but we have linear in n. Okay, then there was other particular metric space that we look at. So Fattal proved it for metric space so that every distance is 0, 1, or 2. So they are fairly simple metric space, but still the proof was not trivial. And it was the first metric space for which the conjecture was proved. And there is also this very nice result of Camper and Patkush that proved that they look at lines in L1. So you are in R2 with distance L1. And this is, so L1 is the Manhattan distance. So you are in the grid, more or less. And what if I take if I take the distance L1, so the L1, the shorter paths, they look like this. What is the line defined by A and B? So it contains every point that are in between A and B, which correspond to this square. It contains every point that are in this quarter of the plane. If you have a point here, to go from here to A, you can easily go through B. Similarly, it contains all this, and it does not contain points there and there.
Are these results n to the 2-bit lines?
And to the...
You say metric spaces where all distances are 0, 1, or 2. In conclusion, there are n to the power 2-bit lines?
Ah, no, n. Only n.
What?
Oh, yes, okay.
What is the conclusion?
Here there is at least n distinct lines. But when n is large enough, I think you can prove n to the 4/3, and this is tight. A very good remark, yes, thank you. So yeah, in 0, 1, 2 metric space, normally the tight example is the near pencil. But this is not realizable in a 0, 1, 2 metric space for the distance 0, 1, or 2. And actually, in 0, 1, 2 metric space, there is much more lines, and the good answer is asymptotically this one, n to the 4/3. So for small cases, this is not true. So this is some kind of tight, say that there is n distinct lines. But otherwise, this is the right amount, but not n squared, n to the 4/3. There is an easy example. You take k partite graph, where each set have the good size and k is the good size, and you find this number of lines. A complete k partite graph is a 1-2 metric. Does it answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so this is the result of Cantor and Patkush. So they couldn't prove the result, but they are near. Okay, I have to be quicker. So I just want to end the talk with a possible conjecture. There was already a lot of conjecture. But here it's a conjecture for Euclidean geometry that we are working on it with Edouard right now. So okay. So I go back to the Euclidean plane with the Bruijn-Dutch. So I have that either is n points So if I take n points, it defines m lines, and W-Dash tell me that m is at least n. But okay, this is tight because of the near pencil, so we cannot. But still, in most of the configuration, m is way larger than n. So we want to refine it, and this is a way to refine it is to add a parameter here that I call IAV, and this parameter will be at most 1, and it be equal to 1 for the near pencil. And this parameter is average intersection. So if name L1, L2, Lm the lines. So let's take an example. So if I look at the intersection between two lines, like those two lines, they intersect. So the intersection is of course at most 1, but be careful that those two lines here does not intersect because this point is not in my thing. Okay, so in the average intersection is this. I sum the intersection for each pair of lines, and I divide by the number of pair of lines. So this is the average intersection. In the near pencil, every pair of lines intersects on one point. So the average intersection is 1. So this might be 2. And okay, so this is this conjecture. And actually, there is maybe a nicer way to see it. Is that what is this? What is this? If I count every intersection, how many times I'm going to count this point? If there is a 1, 2, 3, 4 lines going through this point, this is the degree of the point, the degree of V. Here it's equal to 4. How many times it will be counted in this sum? Well, it will be 2 d of V choose 2. Right? For each pair of lines, I count it once. So this is equal to sigma d of V choose 2 when V is a point divided by n choose 2, which is equal to okay. And now if I replace this by this, I have the following equivalent equation. Thank you. Yeah. So it's a nice equation that links the sum of the degree with number of points, number of lines. And it might be true. Maybe we'll know it at the end of the workshop. Who knows? I had a slide again that I didn't use. So everything is written here. And okay, this is a type because there is a tight example that is the near pencil, but this is another tight example. In this example, there is 13 lines, n points, and they're all of degree 4. And if you replace if you compute, it's equal. So it's tight, and there is more tight example. So I don't have infinite family of tight example. I don't know if it exists. Or maybe also the conjecture is completely false. So I don't know. And maybe I found this example in a paper of Kelly and Moser. And if you look at the line that has exactly 2 points here, there are exactly 3 of them. Maybe this one, and another one. I can see right now. This one here. And this is tight. So this is the configuration that minimizes the number of ordinary lines. You cannot do less than 3. And it is also a tight example for this, but I don't know if it means something or not. All right, thank you very much.